Okay, perfect.
Okay, I will try to sit still.
Hello, Mr. Toel. Thank you very much for this interview.
Yes, thank you, sir.
You are a professor. Professor of which kind? What have you been doing?
Well, for 35 years, I've been teaching international economics, finance, economic theory, and in the honors college. So right now, I think they're finding out how old I am, and so my career is probably coming to an end here pretty soon.
Okay.
But I've had 35 years now in the academic world.
So it's often said, follow the money and you find the motivations and you find the crime. Which crimes did you find? Have you searched for any?
Well, I said in 1985 at the University of Illinois, I said, for the sake of efficiency, human dignity must suffer. And I think that's the greatest crime that we've had in the last 30 years. And that is that we now value people by money and by material things. And so in most of the Western world, in order to achieve efficiency and standardization, because money has to have efficiency and money has to have an increasing standardization. In order to achieve these, we have forgotten about human dignity, what it means to be a human being and to have a full life as a human being. And so this has had a major impact, especially upon Germany. Americans are naturally marketing oriented. And so efficiency and speed, Americans say, okay, that's our way of life. And so there's going to be ups and downs and changes all the time. But that's not really natural to Germans when they are German. They are far more balanced in how they judge human beings and how they count success. And so I think the greatest crime that in following the money, and I have carefully tried to follow who's doing what and what impact it has, is that we now have the majority of the world. Now we have Joe Biden. We still have Angela Merkel. We still have Macron. And so we still live in a world where money is the final decision maker. And that is very harmful to normal human beings. So you studied economics, and when did it occur to you that humanity is more valuable than economics? Well, I discovered Wilhelm Röpke maybe 30 years ago in his book called Humane Economy. And as I read that book, I thought, this is the way it should be. This is what is natural and allows human beings to grow and even to thrive and still be able to earn a living and to be able to buy things. You know, people aren't going to give you things, so you have to have a way to barter or to buy things. And that makes people feel good about their lives, up to a degree. So it's when you start valuing human beings by money. You say, this person has Ferragamo shoes, and those shoes are 2,200 euros. Now, this is a valuable person, and this is a successful person. So we must emulate that person. We must follow them. They are become an example. So when our children put a poster on their wall, it should be a person who is financially successful. And today, it's when people are successful financially, they insist on showing that success with the car they drive, the location of the home they choose, the country club or the inner city club that they aspire to belong to, the clothes they wear. And so now that becomes the only way we judge people. But the question is not even asked. How did they get that money? What did they do that benefited mankind that allowed them to have $2,000 shoes? We've lost that. We lost that deal. Mm-hmm. So, okay.
Yeah. Did you also follow, for example, a Bilderberger, like myself? I was intrigued by such special interest groups that met since 1954 for the first time in Hotel de Bilderberg in Holland.
Well, I know of these things, but no, I have not followed them. In teaching economics, you basically teach foundational things, and of course that includes the entire Austrian school of economics. That includes Keynes and his whole major impact on debt and the way to resolve financial problems. No, I haven't followed the Bilderberger people. No.
Okay. Just a second, just to control whether everything's okay. Perfect. So when you say Austrian economics, the first man that comes into mind is Ron Paul and his son Rand Paul. Mm-hmm. Can I say you are a fan of Ron Paul?
No, nor von Mises, nor the others. But you can't ignore them because their work was important. And their work does indicate a German, Austrian, Swiss sort of underlying way of thinking. And, at the end of World War II, we, the Allies, imposed a template upon Germany. And we said that we must do away with everything that you have adhered to over the past 13 years, actually the last 16 years before that. And so now we want you to be like us, and we want you to like the things that we like, and we want you to value the things that we value, because then you'll be secure, and the world will be secure, and we will solve the German problem. But that included Bletchley Park, major psychological operation. That included the Allies changing the entire education system within Germany. But it also included a new form of economics. And, the word Weltanschauung is not used much anymore. But Germany still today is ruled by an Allied Weltanschauung, or way of looking at the world. And I don't think it's natural to Germans. I think that it's maybe 2 inches deep. The brainwashing is very powerful in Germany, but I don't think that the template has took hold or grown roots deep enough so that Germans have changed the way they think about life. And that is a far more balanced way of thinking than what an American or a British person thinks, or anyone from the Commonwealth of the old empire.
Yeah. So let's talk about your mission, your only mission. Your mission is to wake the Germans up about their consciousness, about their human humanity. Can I say it? Yes?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. And when did you start your mission?
Well, my mission started before I was born, and my mother knew it, and my sister knew it. They knew that there was something very, very different. So that has been with me all of my life, but I've had to wait because I needed to be trained and I needed to grow into that mission, and I had a great deal to understand. And the Germans were not ready for me. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, they weren't ready for me. The things that I say today, or will say this afternoon, now there's an acknowledgement. People nod and they say, yes, that's what my heart is thinking. William can say it out loud, but I can't say it yet, but my heart's speaking. So you can't do anything before it's time, and now is the right time, or at least the window is open for the right time. So my mission has been with me even a priori, or prior to my birth, because my earliest thoughts and dreams, even as a very small child, were of things here and not of things in America. And they were very clear dreams and visions and deals, and they were actual places that I had never been as a human, of course, but places that exist here in Germany. So if you ask me what my mission is, it would be simply to set Germans free. That would be it. And everything beyond that gets a little foggier for me. My mission is that Germans live in an occupied nation, and they live in an occupied mentality. Some of that is self-imposed. Germans are a little bit afraid of themselves because they don't really know what the Deutsche Seele looks like, and they don't really know, if they open their hearts, what they're going to find. And of course Bletchley Park, and of course the Allies, and of course hundreds of different special interest groups outside of Germany continue to remind them that there could be something dark inside. And so my job is to come to them and say, now is the time for you to be free. And that means your nation needs to be sovereign. But you can't be free in the mentality that you currently have. And no one outside of Germany is going to help you. Last night, my wife Lisa had just arrived, and we had a wonderful evening, and there was a piano player at this restaurant. And I went up and I tipped him 10 euros. And I said, would you please play tonight some German music? Now, this was in Austria. And I put the 10 into his little glass cup, and he smiled, and he said, absolutely not. and I thought to myself, no wonder Germans are the way they are. Because Lisa and I were at a little outdoor beer garden not too long ago, a little while ago, and a man was sitting next to us from Brussels, and he had his 7 children and an au pair. Obviously he was wealthy, and someone started playing accordion German music. And he turned to Lisa and I, assuming that we were Americans and would agree with him entirely, and he said, oh, isn't that terrible? I said, no, it's not terrible. And he said, well, all of us in Europe know about these people. Of course, he thought he was talking to a friend, you know, because obviously we weren't. And he said, we all know about these people. And he said, we don't trust them. So that music just is, and I thought, the music is beautiful. I mean, the music makes my soul happy. Yeah. But from Brussels, he hated the music. Yeah. But he also hated what the music stood for. And he assumed that Lisa and I would agree with him completely, because if you were not a German, naturally you would agree. And the majority of the world still carries this stigma that if Germans were ever strong again, then world peace would be threatened. And I can't, it makes me so sad that the Germans that I love have to live under this dark cloud. I give the man 10 euros, and I said, can you play anything German? Mm-hmm. No. I thought, oh my. And of course, I know there were Germans sitting in that restaurant. I mean, there were maybe 40 tables, so at least 6 of those tables had German. Yeah. So I want Germans to be free. Mm-hmm. And I want them to be free, not to be something that I am pointing them towards, but I want them to be free to be totally themselves, period. End of story.
Yeah. So your mission started not 2 years ago, but now in 2021?
Well, my mission, as I said, actually started, I know, it doesn't help me any when I say that I was at Bletchley Park in 1943, because people say, William, you were born in 1945. How could you be at Bletchley Park in 1943? Well, I was in Bletchley Park, and I remember who was there, and I remember what they said, and I remember what they ate, and I can see their faces. Okay, so I've been prepared for longer than this period of time, and then I've had to be so patient, because you can't do anything before people are ready. Yeah. And Germans are now ready, but not all Germans are ready. Mm-hmm. So
I meant in Germany. So your mission in Germany. When did you come to Germany to start these lectures?
This only started a couple of years ago. Actually, less than that. And I stayed in hiding, verstecken, and in Cologne about 9 months ago. Mm-hmm. I did my first public interview, and that was with Uta Oglivi, and a very nice woman. Yeah. But we sat at a table just like we're sitting at here, and we were just talking, and I wasn't even aware of a camera. I mean, I knew there probably was one, but I wasn't aware of it, and we were just talking conversationally, and then that video on first they banned it. YouTube banned the video because it received 12,500 views in the first 4 hours. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it was banned. Mm-hmm. And then it started popping up everywhere, and now that has about 220,000 views, that first deal. So my wife and I were hopeful, Stefan, that it would receive 500 views. We said, if we get 500 views, that would be a magnificent result, and yet now it has probably 230,000 views. And so that was the first time I came out of hiding, because I felt like people are now ready to hear something all new. And so,
what is the most dangerous, risky part of your mission? What is it, what you're talking about?
Well, it's when I reveal things of what I know that the regime and the Allies have kept hidden. When Lisa and I wrote "It is Good to Be German," we laid out in very succinct patterns why a German is lucky to be born a German, and why it's a wonderful thing, a good thing. And that video has, I think today on all channels, about 250,000 views. It is good to be German. And that includes downloads, and that includes people buying a little booklet. We give everything away for free. We charge for nothing, and never will for Germans. But now there are bookstores selling that little booklet, so we can't stop them from doing that. But and then we did Bletchley Park, in which we detailed exactly what happened there, when it happened, who did it, and what impact it had upon Germans, not only in 1945 through 1949, but the impact it has on all German families today. And that got me 2 death threats. And that got me on the radar, so at one time 3 trainloads of Antifa came to break up one of my meetings. And so it is dangerous when you reveal things that otherwise no German could have found out about Bletchley Park. Not one word of it was ever written down. Mm-hmm. It was so top secret that no one has broken that deal. So then we went and wrote Kurt 45 about the Rheinwiesenlage, and 90% of Germans had never heard of the Rheinwiesenlage, and they certainly didn't know what uncivilized things had happened there. Were 5.2 million Germans, and the Allies had no idea who were German soldiers and who was a German postman. So if you were wearing any uniform of any kind, you were thrown into the barbed wire. And of course, I don't use numbers, but I believe that about 800,000 Germans perished from exposure, from lack of food, lack of medical supplies, and lack of water, which is why during that 8 days of the walk am Rhein, I didn't eat or drink. For the most part, if someone brought me something and said, I'm sacrificing this to the boys, I used the term boy, Stefan, because 40% of the Germans put into the Strakeldak, 40% of them were teenagers. Mm-hmm. And no one knew that. So now, but that made me unpopular because it was the Willy Brandt said in 1972, we're not going to talk about the Rheinwiesenlage. It's verboten. We're not going to talk about it anymore because it will embarrass the Allies, and we need the Allies badly. So it is not a topic of discussion for Germans. And that is what happened up until we did this. So the story that Lisa and I wrote about Kurt and his friend and their lives, and then what happened to them, a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, inside that barbed wire, where they were denied food, medical supplies, they were denied water. The only water they had to drink was so polluted. The Rhine River at that time had dead horses and dead people, and was full of benzene and full of, it was terribly polluted at that point. And that was the only water they had through one small pipe. It caused dysentery, it caused illness within the same day. So that story, the regime did not want told because it is uncivilized. It is a Zivilisationsbruch to put 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14, who have never shaved, to put them in the barbed wire and refuse to feed them. And then when their families try to approach the barbed wire with an apple or with a piece of bread, by the order of Dwight Eisenhower, they were shot dead, shot dead. Mm-hmm. And there was no excuses made. So that was a tragedy that needed to be talked about. But of course it made me very unpopular with the regime, because they said, William, you're an American, you don't realize there are some topics that are verboten. They're not only politically incorrect, but we don't allow Germans to talk about those topics. And so now over 200,000 Germans have read Kurt 45 on both as a flip book, as a her book, very impressive her book done by a man from the Black Forest, and also on our website. So there's a great curiosity about things that Germans do not know. And if they didn't know about it is good to be German, and if they didn't know anything about Bletchley Park, even though it affected their daily lives, and if they knew nothing about the Rheinwiesenlage and Kurt 45, then the question is, what else don't they know about? And when I say that to a German group, every head nods up and down, because they believe that there's other things that they have not been told. and they live in Germany. You live in a cocoon. You live in a cocoon, and some things are allowed, many things are not allowed. And when is the last time, Stefan, that Germans ask good questions? I mean, Germans are the best question askers in the world, and now they've went for 75 years in silence, afraid they're going to lose their job, afraid they're going to be outcast, afraid that the police will start paying attention to them. Why? Because they ask simple questions.
Yeah.
Well, to be a German means to ask questions. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Just like you're questioning me today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it reminds me to the East Germans when from 1989, when I heard them saying, "I would think." So often they started a sentence and you ask, "What do you think about?" And then they said, "I would think."
No, I was there too.
Yeah.
I was there too, the same as you were. And the East German always looked over his shoulder.
Yeah.
Somebody was listening, and they were afraid of who was listening. And of course, there was one telephone line for every 13 people, and that was always being listened to. But also, you didn't have any idea who you could trust. But there's some of that in West Germany today, in all of Germany today.
Yeah.
And it's always, when I'm having a nice conversation with someone, they'll always look and see who's listening to me, assuming that someone is listening to them all the time. So, and I'm troubled by the fact that Germans are not kind to each other. You know, that is not natural to Germanness over the centuries. Germans had greater unity in previous periods. I'm not talking about the Nazi side. I'm talking about 100 years, 200 years, 400 years ago. Germans treated each other better. They cared for each other more, and they felt more like a family. Now, maybe that was because they were on farms and they were in agriculture and they needed each other's help. But I don't believe so. I think that Germans naturally enjoy caring for each other. But the modern German has become so cynical. They live in a controlled atmosphere and they don't really know who to trust. And it makes me so sad to see Germans treat each other badly. Now, if there's a British tourist here, they don't treat the British tourists badly, but they treat each other badly. They judge each other way too quickly on small things. So instead of encouraging each other and finding something good to say about the other person, they find little things and then they become critical of those things. And so when I see that, I always say, anhalten, stop that, don't do that. That person is hurting. You need that person. Find something nice to say, you know. And then they go, oh, okay. But I have to do that one at a time.
Yes.
And that takes a long time. So
when I came here, I thought I would like to give a present to you. So I thought, what could be delightful? And so I thought, you like German poets.
yes.
So maybe I should bring a translated poem of a German poet.
Okay.
And I would like to say it to you. If it's okay?
Of course, that's fine. You have to tell me who I'm listening to.
Yeah,
Or
I would.
maybe you asked me to guess it. I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't want to embarrass anybody, not you. Just but I would like you to tell me how you what your feelings are, because you are a sensible person. When once this generation has cleansed its shame, has thrown from its neck the villain's yoke, in its entrails feels but hunger for honor, Then from the battlefield covered with endless graves will flash the bloody gleam. Then through the clouds will rush roaring armies. Then through the fields will rage the horror of horrors, the third storm, the return of the dead. If ever this nation from her cowardly slackness remembers her election, her mission, she will receive the divine explanation of unspeakable dread. Then hands will be raised and mouths will sound in praise of her birth. Then in the morning breeze a true emblem will flutter, the royal standard, and bow itself in greeting to the noble, the heroes.
You have heard me say, and when we were together before, I'm sure you heard me say, that this time German strength, and Germany will have honor. There is a renaissance now taking place, and it's only beginning. But the sensitive German, you call it sensible German, is consensus. There is a renaissance, and this afternoon I want to talk about honor, Ehre, and Würdigkeit, dignity. And I want to talk about strength, especially strength in, of course, in both Deutscher Mann und Deutsche Frau, but also, more importantly, in German men, because German men have lost the plot. They don't know if they start to feel strong, then they're immediately uncomfortable, unbequem. And so that puts an extra burden on German women. And I try to pay, I love the Germans, and so wherever I'm at with Germans, I try to pay close attention to them. I observe them because I want to understand how they're feeling and how do they interact with others. And even this morning at breakfast, I was looking around, and a German woman always has a little bit, ein bisschen Angst around her eyes, because she carries more of a burden. You don't see that hardly ever around American women because they don't carry a burden. You know, they have a sense of freedom and a spontaneity and things. But German women don't live in that world. And so when I heard your poem, I heard a kind of strength that is too strong for Germans. I don't want Germans to fall back into a strength that leads them to violence. At my last meeting I held, it was a large meeting, and a woman stood up and she said, "William, you want us to become strong again, physically strong." And she said, "We're not physically strong. And you want us to become emotionally strong. And you want us to become spiritually strong." Fine, we're with you, okay? But what is the physical strength for? Does that mean that we will have violence? And does that mean that we will have violence against immigrants? And I said, no. You know, everyone in this room knows that I have power. And that power cannot be used for me. It must be used only to set Germany free. That's the only way it can be used. But if I sense violence, or I hear about violence, or I hear in your poem something that could lead to violence, the standard that is raised, okay, then I'm opposed to that. But not only am I opposed to it in my opinion, meine Meinung, but I'm also opposed to it with the power that I have been given. And so if a German or a group of Germans lead them to harm others, now they find me in opposition, and they can't win. And they know they can't win. And matter of fact, if you oppose me, you will lose. And most groups know that, and so they're uncomfortable with that, and that's where I want them to be. Violence will never work in Germany. Love is the only thing that will work, but it has to be a strong love, Stefan. And that is what I need, that is the nuance that I need to bring to all of Germany. I want you to be strong. Matter of fact, I demand that you be strong, okay? But it is not a strength to harm, and it is not a strength to dominate, and it is not a strength where the patterns of words lead you to the point where eventually you end up harming other people, because you will be crushed again if you go down that path. But if you are extremely strong and you keep love at the center, I can promise you, versprochen, that you will not be harmed. No one will come from outside and do harm to you if you keep love at the center. So I've had, today's meeting will be number 198.
Wow.
198 meetings. And so this is what I drive home to them. And the majority of people understand it intuitively. They understand it immediately. We have been strong in the past, but we didn't know how to share love. Mm-hmm. We could love our families, but outside our patriotism or our nationalism or our poetry, and matter of fact, what you read to me was the kind of poetry that Germans have read, and it leads them to believe in a dominance. Eventually, they leave in a dominance. Germans are extremely talented, and they have distinct talents, but they are not dominant. They are not superior, but they are very, very special in their role. And they have to begin playing that role fully again. The world is in desperate need of Germans to be Germans once again.
Mm-hmm. So may I reveal who was?
Yes, of course.
Okay, this was Stefan George.
Yes, I was going to say there were two people, and George would have been one of them, and of course Klaus von Stauffenberg and his brother Berchtold, and there were quite a few young noblemen who were disciples of Stefan George.
Uh-huh. Did you study the German resistance?
Well, I have had a lifetime to make myself aware of everything that might impact German thought today. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can't go to hardly any city in Germany that you don't find a Stauffenberg Weg or a Stauffenberg something, and yet, of course, he and Berchtold were disciples of Stefan George, mm-hmm. and others.
Alexander also.
Yes, yes, yes. But there were quite a few extremely bright young noblemen at that time, mm-hmm. who found Stefan and his works and his words to be almost like a spiritual guru for them. They were attracted to him like a magnet. So,
yeah,
not like a poet, but like a magnet. So yes, that would have been one of the two that I would have guessed. So.
Okay, great. I'm impressed because in Germany, I don't think I can meet 1% of people who know Stefan George at all.
Yes. Well, you know, like many others, we don't really know as much about George as we would like. He was somewhat of a esoteric type of character who kind of floated a little bit in the air, But also when the Nazis came to power, they found some of his works to be attractive, but we never really know whether he wanted to be found attractive. He never made it really clear as to what, politically where he stood, or what he really liked, or whatever else. So.
He behaved like a chameleon.
Yeah, he was a chameleon, and he used his intelligence to stay, what I call just in the navel. He was always a little bit in the navel, and maybe a poet. Maybe that's a natural place for a poet, especially a poet who wrote what he wrote. So.
And he went to Switzerland, and I believe he committed suicide. He had don't you think so? He had a physical specialty with kidneys, and then he knew what not to eat and drink, but he did so just to pass over.
Yes, I don't know that story. I have learned a long time ago that if I have a vacuum in my knowledge, it's best to say, I don't know. So I don't know how he died. I know he had some very tragic moments in his life where people who were very close to him died at young ages, and
Maximim.
Yes, of course, and that was a great trauma, and he was a slightly changed person by those traumas. So, and that's one of the things that I want now for Germans is to learn how to mourn, and to be able to mourn, and to have a sense of normalcy. In their emotions, where their emotions are not attributed to something by somebody else, but in the way that a man from France, or a man from Canada, or a woman from Mozambique can go through a full range of emotions without being judged. So I want Germans to be able to rest easy. I saw in a hotel the other day one of the big grandfather clocks, and it had a pendulum, and it was very expensive old clock, probably from the 19th century, but the pendulum was so accurate that it only moved a quarter of an inch like this, and yet the time was virtually perfect. So that's what I want for Germany, is to be normal and to be able to rest comfortably in the center, where small movements have a momentum and are enough to carry their lives. They don't have to work so hard as they do today.
Yeah.
So.
Back to the perfect storm. Is time playing on our side, or is it playing on the people who make the perfect storm?
Well, the perfect storm, of course, is somewhat misunderstood. Now, it is broadly known, and I don't attribute that to me, but I started talking about that, the one I did 9 months ago, which was my first public coming out in Germany. It was named The Perfect Storm. But the perfect storm has a physical element that's quite simple, and that is rising inflation, which is it's automatic. You're already near 5%, and the pressures underneath will cause that inflation to go much higher. And of course, the controlling nature. Germans are the last people on earth that you should ever have to control. Germans should have a government that is laissez-faire, because when Germans are themselves, and when they are educated in a normal German pattern, they are self-disciplined people. They have self-control. And they've always had a degree of self-control. So when Germans see someone who is ill, they would naturally feel an empathy for them, but they would stay away from them. They don't need to be told, specifically, exactly, and regulated as to what they must do. So, you have inflation, you have immigration that always comes under the table as versus on top of the table. Angela Merkel learned her lesson in 2015 and 16, and that is, come one, come all is not politically popular. Even my college students, my German college students, who are laissez-faire, I mean, they don't seem to care about anything. They have a wonderful life, their parents are wealthy, but they do care about unlimited immigration, which is the wrong immigration. My college students care about that. What they want is the Germans to use their technological expertise to begin asking questions before the immigrant gets to the German border, before they are actually at the border where emotion plays a deal. And so even the majority of my German college students, 20-year-olds, say, from now on, we check the immigrants. What is their attitude towards women? Have they been in and out of prison? What is their attitude towards democratic government? What is their tolerance for other religions? And so these are simple questions, and I was here in 2015. I walked with the immigrants at the peak of the immigration crisis, and no German authority asked any of these questions, none. One day we had nearly 60,000 come through the fence from Hungary. Not one German authority asked them. So any questions? And of course, tens of thousands of Germans have suffered because of that, unnecessarily suffered because of that. So the immigrants themselves are not bad, Stefan, but in the perfect storm, the wrong immigrants, and not using your ability to even do simple background checks, that is wrong. And that's still going on. And now from Afghanistan, and also from Syria, after the elections, you're going to get another large spurt of immigration. But once again, my fear is that will be under the table because it's so unpopular with the German people that they won't be informed of it. So, control, immigration, inflation. That is the physical elements that bring the perfect storm to the forefront in Germany. But the key thing about the perfect storm is it's a spiritual event. It's not only a physical event, it's a spiritual event. Those people who were with me that night of June 21st have never got over what they experienced. People come up to me now who I don't even know them. I've never seen their face, and they say, William, I was there that night. And you said it would happen at midnight. And when the clock went tick, tick, midnight, all of a sudden the sky lit up with yellow lightning that went sideways and like a cobweb, and there was no thunder. It was lightning that was coming from nowhere. And all of us were shocked. We couldn't believe what was happening. And then this incredible wind came that it would almost turn over cars. It was so strong. And yet there was no forecast of this. And so tens of thousands of people who experienced that night said, this was a spiritual event like we have never, ever seen before. And it happened exactly at midnight. It began. But of course it did. Because Germans are not strong enough to set themselves free. That means that there has to be a spiritual power or series of events that wake Germans up to reality and say, now you must do something. You can't simply sit occupied for all of your life and be satisfied to let other people take responsibility for you. Mm-hmm. And so the first event of the perfect storm was the flood. And it was a localized event. But look at what the flood did. It did exactly what the storm is here for. It shone a light upon the fact that German leadership is consumed with outside interest from Germany. They're consumed with draußen, nicht drinnen. They're not concerned about the German family who lives in a house It's all of a sudden full of water and mud. They are concerned about being in Washington, D.C., and receiving doctorates and toasting with champagne, but more importantly, being toasted by everyone in a room. You are a wonderful person. You are a wonderful person. Meanwhile, Germans are dying, and meanwhile, even the local, even authorities did not respond. And when they did respond, they were slow, and their response was inappropriate. So what was the outcome of the flood? Germans came from all over Germany to help each other. Well, that is exactly what the storm is here for. Germans came with their shovel. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask to be recognized. They didn't want their picture taken. They didn't want to be on television. But they chipped in and they said, we're here to help. So all of a sudden, dialect didn't matter. All of a sudden, which land you were from didn't matter, because Germans were working together to solve a problem. Not in the official regime, but because they were caring for each other. And so that's what the perfect storm will continue to do, shining a light on the fact that your political system is consumed with outside interest, and German families have no one to be a champion for them. And now they have to have champions. So at first, it's going to be other Germans who drive in their cars and drive in their trucks for 6 hours, bring their shovel, and shovel mud with somebody they didn't even know. And in a little valley, they wouldn't even realize who lives there. But now they do know. And they didn't go home the next day. These people stayed for a week or longer. And so it was a hardship, but they were glad to do it. Because when the perfect storm has finished its work, Germans will care for each other again. And they will take care of each other again. And they will start finding unity that is natural. I've said it time and time again, when one German suffers, all Germans suffer. This is a family of people. And when that flood came through those areas, Germans came from all over Germany and said, these are my people. I'm going to work. And I may not even find a restaurant open, but I'll eat what I can, I'll do what I can, but I'm going to work as long as the sun's up. And the perfect storm will continue along that path, shining a light on leaders who don't care, and bringing Germans together in greater unity. And by the time the storm is finished, and it will finish its work, because it's a spiritual event, then Germans will find unity once again. But it won't come through politics. It won't come through the education system. The storm will create events and opportunities in which allow Germans to physically and emotionally be involved with each other. So, thank God the storm is here. So,
what timeline do you estimate for the perfect storm to, how long do we have to have this perfect storm until we are united as a nation?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I speak of certainty, then I will tell you this is something that's certain. Going all the way back to the fall of the wall, your leaders were both amazed and angry that I was able to give them an exact date 18 months in advance. They said it's impossible. You must be with the CIA, and the CIA created the fall of the wall, and that's how. Well, the CIA can't come up with a date and change world history. That's impossible. So there are certain things that I know, and I will say to you, I know this date, I know this time. I do not control the perfect storm. I am certainly not God. I don't know the exact date, but a human guess, so remember, a human guess only, I would say 16 to 18 months, but that's only a human guess, and so I cannot say to the German people, you can count on this. I don't control the storm. I know that within a few months the storm will have another event, and it won't be localized. It will now begin affecting all of Germany, and certainly the third event will affect all of Germany, so that Germans are forced, those who are determined to not feel German, and those who are determined that I am not going to be a part of this renaissance, by the time we're at the third event, they too will starting to pick up their shovel and go where. Now, it won't be a flood again, because the storm is very wise. Humans are clever, the storm is wise. So no one could anticipate the flood, and no one did anticipate it. When it comes again, no one will be able to anticipate what the direction will be or what the nature will be. But it will be broader, and once again, shining a light on leaders who aren't concerned about German families primarily, and forcing Germans to come together to solve a huge problem. And that's the only way they're going to, because the Allies and Bletchley Park and other interests divided Germans as if they were broken in pieces. And they've remained broken in pieces. And so now the perfect storm will bring Germans into wholeness, completeness. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing, because the world desperately needs Germans to be German again.
Shall you be the whole time here in Germany until the perfect storm has ended?
Well, I hope so. Every time you've been in trouble, whether it's the credit crisis, the immigration crisis, whether it's the great crisis with the fall of the Soviet Union and all the turmoil, I've always been here with you. There's never been a crisis that you've been through that I have not been here. And my wife has always said, honey, the Germans are in trouble. You have to be there. Go. And I have been here. So, but you know, I'm in my 76th year of life right now, and I do need a break every once in a while, because it's intense here. It is, it's intense. And Germans have great need right now, and I think every German who has been in a meeting with me would agree. This man is willing to give his life for us. He is. That's a given. He will give his life for us. But, Stefan, I am giving my life. Physically, emotionally, and in every way. And there's a cost to that. There's a cost to the travel. You know, I mean, I leave here, and now I go to Munich to stay a night, and I go to Heidelberg to stay, and then I'm on to Berlin, and then I'm on to Görlitz, and there's always another group, wonderful group, standing room only of people, and they say, William, we need to hear your voice. Fine. But I'm beginning to be an old man. So, yes, I would like to be with you continuously, but if my wife says, hon, I need you to come home to get some energy back, because here I give and I give every day, all of myself. I don't hold anything back. But Germans aren't ready to give back. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. They are able for the first time to receive love, mm-hmm. and they are able for the first time to receive words that their hearts know to be true. But they don't know how to give it back yet. Yeah. So the energy's all going out, mm-hmm. and not much is coming back. So I would think I would be with you 80% of the time, mm-hmm. between now and the end of the storm's work, and I will certainly be here with you to rejoice when the storm's work is finished. And remember, I don't know that date, but when it's finished, and you now have a new form of leadership, a new type of leadership in Germany. Leaders who love German families, I mean, and who love German children, and who devote their lives the same way I am devoting my life to Germans. Your new leaders will devote their entire lives to German babies who aren't here yet, building an education system on German foundation, creating an infrastructure so that every baby born in Germany, if they wish, can walk out of the door at 10 years old and be able to come to anybody on the street and say, I am a German. I am proud to be German. Today, if they said that, they would get in trouble. Even their neighbor would say, shh, be quiet, be quiet. You must not say those words. Those are bad words. But no, not in the new Germany. And so these new leaders will be willing to give their entire lives to raising German babies in a world where they are free of guilt, free of shame, free of control, free to be themselves, period. So that is where we're going.
Last question. Did I forget something? What would you like to tell the German audience?
Well, I want a broader audience to know. You know, I want those Germans who are still sleeping, those Germans who have heard rumors about me, which are, of course, all over the place. Some of them have a great deal of imagination to them. What people see in me is exactly what they get. There is nothing more. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing frightening. There's nothing weird. What they see is exactly what they get. And so I want to say to other Germans, to the 95% who aren't awake, you know, you have nothing to fear. You have nothing to fear from a new Germany. You have nothing to fear from a better political system. And you certainly have nothing to fear from me. It would be impossible for me to betray any German or to do even the slightest harm to any German. I walked with more than 15 groups of Germans, probably averaging 100 each, on the Rhine River. And they came from all over, and they said, we want to walk with William. And so we walked together, and it was a joyful time for everybody. There was no violence. There was no trouble. The police ignored us because we were doing something that was in wide open. Nothing was hidden. So that's what you will always find from me. Nothing will ever be hidden, and my love for you will always be pure, because that's the source of the power itself. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.